corridors of Westminster are ablaze tonight. Just 60 minutes ago, the political earthquake everyone whispered about finally struck. Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces the fight of his political life as his own MPs turn against him in a move that could topple the government before sunrise. The Brexit promises that swept Labour to power now lie shattered on the floor of Parliament, and the rage from both sides of the aisle is unlike anything Britain has witnessed in decades. What happened in that closed-door meeting? Why are loyal Labour MPs now calling for their own leader's head? And could this be the moment that changes British politics forever? The clock is ticking, allegiances are crumbling, and what unfolds in the next few hours will determine not just Starmer's fate, but the future of the entire nation. The bombshell dropped at exactly 6:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Multiple sources inside Number 10 confirmed that a formal motion of no confidence has been submitted against Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and the names attached to that document read like a who's who of Labour's parliamentary backbone. These aren't fringe rebels or backbench troublemakers. We're talking about senior MPs, former cabinet ministers and representatives from heartland constituencies that bled red for generations. The trigger: a Brexit betrayal so profound that it's ripped the mask off everything Starmer promised the British people during the election campaign. For months, whispers echoed through Westminster's ancient halls about secret negotiations with Brussels, about backroom deals that would effectively reverse key Brexit provisions that millions of voters considered sacred. Those whispers just became a deafening roar. According to leaked key documents obtained by multiple news outlets within the last hour, the Starmer government has been in advanced talks to rejoin significant portions of the European Union's regulatory framework, including aspects of the customs union that Leave voters fought so hard to escape. The details are staggering and the implications even more so. Let's rewind to understand how we arrived at this explosive moment. When Keir Starmer led Labour to victory, he did so on a carefully crafted platform that acknowledged Brexit as settled law. He promised voters, particularly those in the red wall constituencies that abandoned Labour under Jeremy Corbyn, that he would make Brexit work for Britain. No return to the EU, no reversal of the referendum, just pragmatic management of the UK's new relationship with Europe. Those promises now appear to be nothing more than election season fiction. The leaked documents reveal a staggering level of coordination with European Commission officials going back at least 6 months. We're talking about regular classified briefings, draft agreements that would subordinate British regulatory autonomy to Brussels-based decision-making, and most explosively, discussions about financial contributions that look suspiciously like the membership fees the UK fought to stop paying. This isn't about minor technical adjustments to trade protocols. This is about fundamentally altering the Brexit settlement that 17.4 million people voted for and that Parliament confirmed through years of bitter debate and political warfare. The reaction inside the Parliamentary Labour Party has been swift and merciless. MPs from constituencies across the Midlands and the North, regions that only recently returned to the Labour fold after decades of Conservative dominance, are reportedly furious beyond measure. These representatives campaigned on Starmer's promises, looked their voters in the eye and guaranteed that Labour had learned its lesson about respecting the referendum result. Now they're facing the political equivalent of a nuclear meltdown back home. Phone lines in constituency offices have been ringing off the hook since news broke. Town halls are being stormed by angry voters demanding explanations. Social media has erupted with hashtags calling Starmer everything from a traitor to a liar, and the anger isn't confined to traditional Brexiteers. Even Remain voting constituencies are expressing shock at the deception, at the gap between what was promised publicly and what was apparently negotiated in private. The sense of betrayal cuts across traditional political lines because at its core, this isn't just about Brexit anymore. It's about whether voters can trust anything their elected officials tell them during campaigns. Inside Downing Street, the atmosphere is reportedly one of barely controlled chaos. Emergency meetings have been running continuously since the no confidence motion was filed. Starmer's closest advisors are engaged in desperate damage control, trying to keep wavering MPs from joining the rebellion, while simultaneously preparing a defence for what promises to be the parliamentary battle of the century. The Prime Minister himself is said to be furious, not just at the rebellion, but at whoever leaked the documents that exposed the negotiations. So there's a full-scale mole hunt underway within the government, with security services being called in to trace the source of the disclosure. But here's the brutal political reality that everyone in Westminster understands. It doesn't matter who leaked the documents. What matters is that the information they contain appears to be accurate and verified through multiple independent sources. Starmer can rage about leaks all he wants, but he can't unring this bell. The British people now know what their Prime Minister was negotiating behind closed doors while telling them something completely different in public. And the political price for that deception may well be his career. The mechanics of what happens next are as dramatic as they are constitutionally significant. A motion of no confidence in the British system isn't just political theatre, it's a mechanism that can literally bring down a government and force a general election. The motion has been filed, and according to parliamentary procedure, it must be debated and voted on within a specific time frame. If a majority of MPs vote that they have no confidence in the Prime Minister's ability to govern, the consequences are immediate and severe. Starmer would be obligated to resign, and the question of who leads Britain would be thrown into absolute turmoil. Here's where it gets even more complicated and dangerous for the government. This isn't an opposition motion that Labour MPs can simply vote down along party lines. This is an internal rebellion, meaning Labour MPs themselves are saying they've lost faith in their own leader. The numbers are still fluid and changing by the hour, but sources suggest that anywhere from 40 to 70 Labour MPs might be prepared to either vote against Starmer or abstain, which in parliamentary math amounts to the same thing. If even a fraction of those numbers hold, the Prime Minister is finished. The Conservative opposition is watching this unfold with barely concealed glee, but they're also calculating their own strategic moves with surgical precision. Opposition leader and former ministers have been unusually quiet in the immediate aftermath of the motion being filed, and that silence is telling. They're not rushing to pile on because they understand something crucial about this moment. If they play their cards right, they don't need to do anything at all. Labour is destroying itself from within, and the best strategy for the Conservatives is to step back and let that process play out completely before making their move. Behind the scenes, however, Conservative whips are already working the phones, reaching out to disaffected Labour MPs with subtle suggestions about future cooperation, about how Britain needs stability and leadership that respects the will of the people. They're not asking for defections yet, but they're planting seeds that could blossom into a full-scale parliamentary realignment if this crisis continues to escalate. The constitutional implications of that scenario are staggering and unprecedented in modern British politics. Let's talk about what this means for Brexit itself, because that's the core issue that's torn everything apart. Brexit was supposed to be settled. 3 prime ministers lost their careers over it. Parliament was paralysed for years, and the country endured multiple elections and a referendum that split families and friendships down the middle. After all that pain and division, the Johnson government finally got Brexit done, for better or worse, and the expectation was that Britain would move on to other issues. What these leaked documents suggest is that the Brexit battle never really ended. It just went underground, with Remainers in positions of power quietly working to reverse or undermine key provisions of the settlement whenever public attention was focused elsewhere. Starmer's government appears to have calculated that enough time had passed, that enough Brexit fatigue had set in, that they could begin walking back commitments without facing serious political consequences. That calculation has proven to be catastrophically wrong. Brexit voters haven't forgotten, haven't forgiven, and certainly haven't given permission for their democratic choice to be negotiated away in secret. The specific provisions in the leaked documents are worth examining because they reveal just how extensive the planned reversal would have been. We're talking about regulatory alignment that would require British businesses to comply with EU standards they thought they'd escaped. We're talking about dispute resolution mechanisms that would give European courts jurisdiction over British law in specific sectors. We're talking about Labour mobility provisions that would effectively reopen freedom of movement through the back door. And we're talking about financial contributions, potentially billions of pounds annually, that would flow from British taxpayers to Brussels in exchange for market access that Brexit voters had explicitly rejected the price tag for. Each of these elements individually would be politically explosive. Together, they constitute nothing less than a fundamental betrayal of the Brexit mandate. Starmer's defenders will argue that pragmatic adjustments are necessary for economic reasons, that ideological purity on Brexit is less important than trade relationships and business certainty, but that argument rings hollow when the adjustments were negotiated in secret and deliberately hidden from the voters who elected this government. The media firestorm surrounding this crisis has reached levels rarely seen, even in Britain's historically aggressive press environment. Front pages across the political spectrum are running variations of the same devastating headlines. The tabloids are calling it the Great Brexit Betrayal, questioning whether democracy itself means anything if politicians can simply ignore referendum results once safely in office. The broadsheets are more measured in tone, but no less damning in substance, with detailed analyses of how the leaked proposals would functionally reverse key Brexit achievements. Even traditionally, Labour supporting publications are struggling to defend the indefensible, with editorial boards that back Starmer now calling for transparency and accountability. Television news has entered that breathless rolling coverage mode where every development, no matter how minor, is treated as breaking news. Political correspondents are stationed outside Parliament, outside Downing Street, outside the homes of key MPs, all trying to capture the next piece of this rapidly evolving story. Social media has become a battlefield where hashtags trend and counter-trend within minutes, where amateur political analysts and armchair constitutional experts are predicting everything from Starmer's imminent resignation to a full-blown constitutional crisis that could require royal intervention. International reaction has been swift and reveals just how closely the world was watching Britain's post-Brexit trajectory. European capitals are officially maintaining diplomatic silence, but off-the-record briefings from Brussels paint a picture of confusion and concern. EU officials who were apparently involved in the secret negotiations are now scrambling to distance themselves from the controversy, claiming that talks were preliminary and non-binding. That's diplomatic speak for we didn't think this would blow up so spectacularly and we want no part of the fallout. In Washington, where the special relationship between the US and UK remains a cornerstone of Western foreign policy, there's barely concealed frustration. American officials invested significant political capital in maintaining strong ties with post-Brexit Britain, and the prospect of that relationship being destabilised by internal British political chaos is causing genuine concern at senior levels, from Moscow to Beijing. Capitals that have consistently viewed Brexit as a symptom of Western democratic decline are watching with interest, seeing confirmation of their narrative that democratic systems are inherently unstable and unreliable. Back in Westminster, the parliamentary arithmetic is becoming clearer and more dire for Starmer with each passing hour. The initial count of potential rebels suggested 40 to 70 MPs might vote against the Prime Minister, but updated whip counts are now suggesting the numbers could be even higher. We're hearing reports of entire regional caucuses, particularly from the Midlands and Northern England, meeting to coordinate their response, and the consensus emerging from those meetings is reportedly one of unified opposition to Starmer's leadership. These aren't radicals or malcontents. These are mainstream Labour MPs who won their seats by promising voters they would respect Brexit and make it work. They're facing political annihilation in their constituencies if they're seen as complicit in this betrayal, and survival instinct is a powerful motivator in politics. For many of these MPs, the calculation is brutally simple. They can stand with Starmer and likely lose their seats at the next election, or they can stand with their constituents and at least have a fighting chance of survival. When politicians are forced to choose between their leader and their careers, the leader usually loses. The constitutional experts and political scientists are having a field day analysing what happens if the no confidence vote actually succeeds. The most likely scenario is that Starmer would be forced to resign as Prime Minister, triggering a leadership contest within the Labour Party. But here's where things get complicated. Does the existing government continue in caretaker mode during that leadership contest? Does Parliament dissolve and trigger a general election? Could the King be forced to intervene and appoint someone else to form a government? These aren't theoretical questions anymore. They're practical constitutional issues that Britain might need answers to within days or weeks. Some analysts are suggesting that if Starmer falls, the Labour Party itself might fracture beyond repair. The Brexit divide that was supposedly healed by Starmer's leadership would rip open again, potentially leading to formal splits and new political parties emerging from the wreckage. Others argue that Labour has survived worse crises and will ultimately find a way through, though perhaps with different leadership and a very different approach to European relations. What everyone agrees on is that British politics is entering a period of profound instability and uncertainty, with consequences that will echo for years regardless of how this immediate crisis resolves. As night falls over London and this unprecedented political drama continues to unfold, the question on everyone's mind is simple but profound. Can Keir Starmer survive this? The Prime Minister's allies are mounting a fierce rearguard defence, arguing that the leaked documents are being deliberately misinterpreted, that pragmatic engagement with Europe isn't betrayal, that voters elected Labour to govern competently, not to wage ideological warfare over Brexit forever. They're pointing to economic data suggesting that some regulatory alignment would boost trade and create jobs, that the financial contributions discussed were tiny compared to potential economic gains, that the whole controversy is being deliberately inflamed by Brexit hardliners who are never going to accept any form of European cooperation. These arguments might have some merit in a calm, rational debate, but we're long past calm and rational. The political reality is that perception matters more than policy details, and the perception right now is that Starmer lied to voters about his Brexit intentions. Whether that perception is entirely fair or partially manufactured doesn't change its power to destroy his premiership.